At 1000 hours local time in the Eastern Pacific, 5 smugglers made a decision that would cost them everything. Their go-fast boat was running at 50 knots. Fishing vessels do maybe 12. These weren't fishermen. 4 Mercury outboards at maximum throttle racing across 140 miles of empty ocean. Under blue tarps, $42 million worth of contraband. Split 5 ways, each man would clear $2 million. Enough to disappear forever. They'd done this run 18 times before. Same route, same boat, same protection money paid to the right people. But 25,000 feet above them, something had been watching for 2 hours. What happened next wasn't just another drug bust. It was a masterclass in military precision, airborne marksmanship, and a specialized unit that's been perfecting one impossible skill for over 2 decades. The smugglers thought they were running toward freedom. They were actually accelerating towards something far more precise. The math was simple. The go-fast would burn through its fuel in 4 hours at current speed. The helicopter could launch, intercept, and resolve the situation while the cutter continued closing for the aftermath. At 1100, the MH-65E lifted off the Kimball's flight deck. Twin-turbo mecha engines pushing 853 shaft horsepower each. Unlike the standard search and rescue configuration that most people associate with Coast Guard Dolphins, this aircraft had been modified for a very specific mission. 20 minutes into the flight, the co-pilot spotted it. A white rooster tail stretching half a mile behind the fleeing vessel. 4 outboards running at full throttle throw an absolutely massive amount of water into the air. From 3 miles out, it looked like someone had drawn a chalk line across the ocean. The smugglers were still running their counter-surveillance zigzags, completely unaware they'd been tracked continuously for over 2 hours. At this point, the zigzag pattern was textbook cartel doctrine. Change heading every 3 to 5 minutes. Never maintain a straight line long enough for intercept calculations. Against surface vessels, this worked. A patrol boat trying to intercept would have to constantly recalculate, burning extra fuel with each course correction. But the helicopter operated in 3 dimensions. While the smugglers zagged left and right, the MAH-65E simply flew straight lines between intercept points, cutting corners, and the boat couldn't. Inside the go-fast, the smugglers were probably doing their own math. 4 Mercury 300s burned 25 gallons per hour each at wide-open throttle. Their tank held maybe 400 gallons. They'd been running for 2 hours, 200 gone, 2 hours of fuel left, maybe less with the added weight of cargo. The mothership rendezvous was 3 hours away at current speed. Physics was becoming their enemy. The helicopter, meanwhile, had 4 hours of endurance and could refuel on the Kimball if needed. This wasn't a chase anymore. This was a foregone conclusion playing out in slow motion. The pilot could afford patience. The smugglers couldn't. The helicopter dropped to 500 feet and approached from the go-fast stern, maintaining a 500-meter standoff distance. This angle kept them outside the effective range for small arms while providing optimal positioning for what might be coming next. The pilot matched the go-fast speed and initiated the compliance phase that Coast Guard procedures demanded. Time for technology to do the talking. The co-pilot activated the long-range acoustic device, or LRAD, capable of projecting intelligible commands at 162 decibels. That's louder than a rocket launch at close range. They broadcast in both English and Spanish. Stop your vessel. Prepare for boarding. This is the United States Coast Guard. The helicopter's rotor downwash created a localized hurricane around the go-fast, spraying chaos everywhere. But the smugglers didn't even slow down. The answer was simple for the criminals below. 5 of them, 2,800 pounds of contraband worth $42 million at street prices, and potential 20-year sentences each. Surrender meant certain conviction. Running meant maybe, possibly, potentially getting away if they could reach shallow water or friendly territory. They'd take those odds, not knowing that the helicopter above them had dealt with runners before. Many times before. 15 minutes of warnings, visual signals, and siren wails produced exactly 0 compliance. The pilot radioed the Kimball for authorization to proceed with warning shots. The approval came back immediately. The rules of engagement were crystal clear for vessels that refused to stop in international waters. Then came the warning shots. The gunner prepared the M240B machine gun mounted on the side, capable of delivering 650 rounds per minute. The first burst went wide, kicking up a line of white spray 50 meters ahead of the go-fast's bow. Universal maritime language for stop immediately. The smugglers kept running. The second burst landed closer, 20 meters off the starboard side, close enough that the crew could feel the impacts through the water. The message was unmistakable. Next burst won't miss. Still they ran. From a moving helicopter, hitting a moving engine block should be impossible. The Coast Guard's Hytron unit had done it 500 times before. Today would be 501. The gunner wasn't just any Coast Guard marksman. He was part of the helicopter Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron, HYTRON, based out of Jacksonville, the only airborne law enforcement unit in the world authorized for what they call airborne use of force. HYTRON crews are the apex predators of maritime interdiction. Since 1998, they've conducted over 500 vessel interdictions, removing $6.7 billion worth of contraband from cartel logistics chains. These aren't your average Coast Guard aviators. They train specifically to shoot engines out of fleeing boats from moving helicopters in ocean conditions. Selection for HYTRON starts with the top 1% of Coast Guard marksmen. Then it gets harder. Candidates spend months at the Maritime Security Response Team's training facility, shooting from moving platforms in Sea State 4. That's 6-foot swells with winds at 20 knots. They learn to read ocean patterns, anticipate wave timing, synchronize their breathing with the helicopter's motion. A typical training evolution burns through 5,000 rounds per gunner. The physics they master are brutal. The helicopter moves at 50 knots on 3 axes: pitch, roll, and yaw. The target moves at 50 knots on a different vector. Ocean swells add vertical movement to both platforms. Wind deflects bullets. Engine vibration throws off aim. Salt spray coats optics. Most military snipers work from stable platforms against stationary targets. HYTRON gunners do neither. Why target engines specifically? Sinking boats destroys evidence and creates maritime emergencies. But a boat with no engines, that's just a floating crime scene waiting for processing. The engines are also the largest, most fragile targets. Aluminum blocks filled with precision parts that turn into shrapnel when hit by anti-material rounds. One shot, one engine, no exceptions. The Barrett M107 weighs 30 pounds. Each round weighs 42 grams and leaves the barrel at 853 meters per second, carrying over 11,000 foot-pounds of energy. For perspective, that's enough kinetic energy to punch through an inch of steel at 500 meters. Outboard engine blocks made primarily of aluminum might as well be tissue paper. The targeting system combined an EOTech 553 holographic sight with an AN-PEC-2 infrared laser designator. The holographic sight projected a reticle that appeared to float at infinity, allowing the gunner to keep both eyes open while tracking. But at these ranges, in these conditions, and technology is just an aid. The real weapon was the gunner's experience. Over 200 interdictions, thousands of training rounds, muscle memory that could compensate for helicopter movement, target movement, and ocean swells simultaneously. The first 50 caliber round found the starboard outer engine's power head. The 300 horsepower Mercury didn't just stop, it disintegrated. Aluminum fragments and oil erupted in a black cloud as internal components suddenly became external. The go-fast speed dropped from 50 to 38 knots instantly. The smugglers were probably hoping 3 engines might be enough to escape. Hope went down with the second shot. The port outer engine took the round through its midsection, severing fuel lines and destroying the water pump. The engine seized solid in second. Speed now down to 25 knots. The go-fast starting to wallow in the swells. That aggressive maneuverability gone. The third shot was almost artistic in its precision. The gunner had found his rhythm, that zen state where helicopter motion, target movement, wind, and trigger squeeze all synchronized. The round entered the starboard inner engine's lower unit and exited through the power head, taking most of the internal components with it. 12 knots now, barely maintaining steerage, one engine trying to push a boat designed for 4. The fourth and final shot ended all pretense of escape. The last Mercury exploded in a shower of metal and oil, the 50 caliber round converting kinetic energy into mechanical destruction. The go-fast went from barely mobile to dead in the water instantly. No engines, no options, nowhere to run. The smugglers were now sitting in their boat, probably calculating whether federal prison was better than trying to swim 200 miles to shore. The helicopter maintained its overwatch position while the Kimball launched the welcome wagon. 2 7-meter RHIBs, rigid hull inflatable boats hit the water running, each carrying 6 operators from Tactical Law Enforcement Team South. These weren't patrol officers with boats. These were maritime special operations personnel trained for specifically opposed boardings in non-permissive environments. The 2 RHIBs approached in a textbook pincer maneuver, their 470 horsepower diesels pushing them at 45 knots boats across the swell. Each boat carried operators wearing level 4 body armor with integrated flotation, M4A1 carbines with EOTech holographic sights, and enough less lethal options to handle any resistance level. The first RHIB approached the Go-Fast's quarter at an oblique angle. Commands erupted in rapid-fire Spanish: hands up, nobody move, get on your knees. The 5 smugglers stood frozen among the tarps. The second RHIB swept into view from the starboard side. 6 more rifles, 6 more operators, 12 total weapons now covering 5 criminals who were rapidly reconsidering their life choices. Beyond the dramatic footage, this interdiction demonstrates a doctrine shift that's been evolving for over 2 decades. The Coast Guard recognized early that traditional surface interdiction couldn't keep pace with go-fast boat technology. Cartels were investing in faster boats, more powerful engines, and sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques. The solution wasn't bigger cutters or faster patrol boats. It was airborne precision strike capability. Hytron represents a fundamental rethinking of maritime law enforcement. Instead of trying to outrun smugglers, you remove their ability to run at all. The helicopter becomes both surveillance platform and strike asset. The Barrett M107 becomes a compliance tool. Engine blocks become the pressure point. This approach has cascading effects throughout the cartel logistics chain. Every interdiction doesn't just remove contraband, it removes a boat, engines worth tens of thousands of dollars, and experienced crews willing to take the risk. Insurance costs rise, recruitment gets harder, the risk-reward calculation shifts. According to Coast Guard data, Hytron operations have maintained a 97% success rate on interdictions where engagement was authorized. That's not just impressive, that's deterrence through demonstrated capability. The strategic message extends beyond the Eastern Pacific. Other nations facing maritime smuggling challenges have taken notice. Colombia, Mexico, and several Caribbean nations have requested Hytron training and tactical consultation. The concept of airborne use of force against vessels is being adopted globally, but there's a broader pattern here. This reflects a philosophy within modern Coast Guard doctrine, not always to chase the most expensive technology, but to prioritize systems that are effective, maintainable, and scalable. The MH-65E isn't cutting edge. The Barrett M107 was designed in the 1980s. What's revolutionary is how they're deployed, the training behind them, and the doctrine that employs them. Traditional law enforcement approaches assume eventual compliance. Cartel operations assume the opposite. Hytron exists because someone recognized that gap and built a capability specifically designed to close it. But Hytron operations aren't without limitations. Legal complexities define every engagement. Rules of engagement require exhaustive compliance attempts before escalation to disabling fire. International maritime law creates jurisdictional puzzles when vessels operate in contested waters or approach territorial boundaries. The weather window for safe operations is narrower than commanders would prefer. Sea State 4 represents the upper limit for accurate shooting. Above that, safety margins collapse. Cartel operators know this and time their runs accordingly. Crew sustainability presents ongoing challenges. The physical and mental demands of Hytron operations create burnout rates higher than standard Coast Guard aviation. Training pipelines struggle to maintain manning levels as experienced gunners rotate to other assignments. Each qualified Hytron operator represents years of investment and thousands of training rounds. Cost questions persist. Each interdiction operation involves multiple aircraft, surface vessels, and specialized personnel. When measured against street value of seized contraband, the math justifies itself. When measured against operational budgets and competing priorities, congressional committees ask harder questions. The cartels aren't static opponents. They adapt. Newer go-fast designs incorporate armor plating around engine compartments. Some smuggling organizations have shifted to semi-submersibles that present entirely different targeting challenges. Others have moved to slower, less conspicuous vessels that blend with legitimate traffic. Looking ahead, the next evolution might involve unmanned systems. Autonomous surveillance platforms could extend coverage without crew fatigue limits. Advanced targeting systems could compensate for increasingly difficult shot geometries, but technology alone won't replace the human judgment required for escalation decisions in complex law enforcement scenarios. The real question isn't whether Hytron remains effective today. The question is whether funding, manning, and political will can sustain this capability through the next decade of cartel adaptation and budget pressures. Because one thing is certain, as long as $42 million paydays exist, someone will try to run, and someone will need to stop them. What do you think about Hitron's approach to maritime interdiction? Is disabling fire the right balance between enforcement and safety, or should the Coast Guard pursue different tactics? How should law enforcement adapt as cartels develop countermeasures? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more military analysis. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.